Well, welcome, Mastermind members. Our book club for this month is Relationship Grit. And I'm going to share some of the things that I got out of it. We don't have anyone that's jumped on yet. So the thing is, I will go through a few things I want you to think about when it came up. When I picked this book for Relationship Grit, it says a true story with lessons to stay together, grow together, and thrive together. It's always challenging in relationships. I've been married 27 years, going on 28, and it's always challenging. But the thing is if we're learning and growing, we're able to make that happen better. So this book was written by John and Catherine Gordon. John Gordon's the kind of the speaker that's wrote Training Camp, The Energy Bus, a lot of great books, and he makes it short and concise. And I like how they broke up this book and really allowed John to share his side of it, but then Catherine to share hers. And the big thing is, I want you to realize grit was an acronym for something. Grit is G equals to God, R is for resolve, I is invest, and T is about together. So let's start off on chapter 1, where he talks about G, which putting God in your moment. And he talks about this cord of 3 strands that's not easily broken. And that's the key you have to really ask yourself. Have you set your relationships up? Do you work on your relationships to make that strand not easily broken? I know that times I'm challenged in that with my own relationship. We all are. But he talks about some key areas to look at in each of those areas. So luckily, we've got Nick Panaleo's going to join us today as we go along here. So I wanted to share with you on what is that strand for you? With your 3 strands, how is it not easily broken down for you? So that what are you doing to make that strong? And one of the things they talk about in the book is how can we use God in our life to help us make that strong strand in our life? Then it talks about some magical moments. And in those magical moments, do you remember the magical moment when you first met your spouse? I know when mine was. I can't tell you the very first time I met her, but the first time we got together, it was actually at a party at my house. And I was having a trailer warming party. So it's really interesting. So that's where what was that magical moment for you? Nick, are you available when you want to share your magical moment with your significant other that you remember one of the first times, either that you met her or you were together?
Yeah, so the first date we went on was at Alex's Pizza in Rolla. I'll never forget it because we ordered a large pizza and some salads, and she ate pretty much all of the large pizza. And I was thinking, how am I going to afford this girl? She has an appetite a lot greater than mine. So that was an interesting moment early on in our relationship about 21 years ago now.
Oh, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. So he talks about those magical moments. And one thing I tell you, if you're watching this, what was your magical moment with your spouse? Think about that. Have a conversation with her about it. It'll bring back a good laugh and kind of brings that forward. So think about that. The next area he talked about, in a couple different areas, but talks about persistence pays off. Do you pursue your spouse or did she pursue you? Do you remember that? On that side of it. It's different for all of us, but which way was it? And it doesn't matter either way, but there can be some interesting conversation. And I think this is one of those books, Nick, I think it's a great one that you read. Don't tell her to read it because that could get you in trouble. But you might say, hey, I just read this. It was pretty interesting. You get some time sometime and you want to check it out. We could have some interesting conversation behind it. So I always tell people, don't tell your significant other they need to read a book because it could get you in big trouble there on that side of it. So the question is, if we talk about, maybe you pursued your wife. So the question I want to ask you is, in your relationship, are you pursuing her now? And what I mean about that, we get crazy with family and friends and all the activities and business and stuff. Are we just showing up? Are we still pursuing her? Are we still dating her and stuff on that side of it? So I don't know, Nick, do you want to get any feedback? Because you got some young children. It's hard to pursue because you're chasing children.
Right, man. It's a challenging time, that's for sure. I really have to really devote time to go on dates and take time away from the kids and stuff with Lindsay. And it's challenging, but have seen myself in just about the past year be a little more diligent and spending more quality time with her, than not. So it's hard. Hopefully I can do a better job in the future, but with two currently and a third on the way, it might get even more challenging. But yeah, I definitely see the value in it. That's for sure.
And I think the thing we have to realize, even when the children grow up, if you don't make the time now, it's hard to make the time then. And one of the questions I put down, and they talk about, do you make her feel special? And it works both ways, but I'm talking to the guys here because this is a men's mastermind. You want her to make you feel special too and stuff, but what are you doing to make her feel special? And I really I will tell you, it's tough when kids are young to do a date night weekly, but make sure you're doing a date night monthly at the minimum and setting that time aside. I mean, I wrote down on my list this Friday that I want to have a date night with Dana. When I came home Monday night, I talked about it and talked about what we're going to do. So we had that conversation so we both know what to expect and what we're looking for. And, it's not a big thing, but, we're going to actually go to a movie. We haven't been to a movie in a long time, so we're going to go to Top Gun. Heard it's really good, so we both decided we wanted to do that. But what are you doing to make her feel special? Keep that in mind. And then they talked about divine appointment. Is there one thing that sticks out to you about your meeting with your spouse, that first time you met them? For John, it was different than it was Catherine, on that side of it. It's always different on each one of us. But what is that divine appointment? Was there something? How did you get that deeper connection it talks about? What is your spiritual connection with your spouse? And how are you creating that relationship? Because as we talked about at the beginning, that third braid is that spiritual component, letting that override, because you can have love. Love is an emotion, but it's really about that spiritual bond that helps keep us together. And I liked what he talked about here on the triple braided cord on page 9. He said, when you make God the center of your relationship, you're not just going through life as two cords, but three cords. Two cords bound together are good, but with a third cord, the bond is much stronger. God is the third cord you need in a relationship. And I thought that was a pretty strong statement there on page 9.
Yeah.
The second chapter was resolve. That was the R. So the G was the God, R was resolve. And he talks about it's often easier to give up and walk away, but relationships require a desire to stay together and a willingness to change for the better. And I think this is one, as we go through life, it doesn't matter where you're at. Nick's in the very much of the children's stage and that growth and that part of it. And it's a fun stage. And we have to remember they're all stages. But the thing is there's going to be challenges come up. We've all had roadblocks and obstacles and challenges. I know for myself, when the kids were young, I'll be honest, I was striving for the business and that was my goal. And I was actually, I never said this to her, but I know I felt it and I acted this way. I said, well, I'm bringing home the money. I'm allowing her to stay at home because I'm earning enough money for her to be able to stay home. Well, she's a doctor of veterinary medicine. She went to more schooling than I did. But my conceited side of it was that. And I know I brought that home to the workplace. And really, I luckily found that change that I needed to make. And I realized that I was a bad, spouse. I was not a good father at that time and was not the person I wanted to be. And I found that luckily in that part of it. But I remember times I came home and there was still laundry in the clothes basket from that morning when I left. And in my head, I was smart enough, I didn't say it out loud. She's now going to probably see this if she watches this video. But in my head, I would say, my God, I can't even believe she hadn't folded that laundry today. And I didn't even touch me of, 3 young kids, ours are close together, 19 and 20 months apart, all 3 of them. That close together, it was crazy at our house. And I should have been so thankful, and I am now, and I became later on, it was around 2006 when I really felt like I found that differences. But what is that resolve that you have to make your relationship to stay together? He talks about issues of the past. We have to watch that. We all have them. That was my issues. Page 14, that's the thing about relationships. It brings the two people together to carry them through their imperfections, their flaws, their issues, their wounds, and somehow, some way, you have to find a way to make it work. And we're always going to have some of those challenges. And you have some of them arguments and fights. And I won't make Nick tell one of his good ones here to us, but I'm sure he's smiling, so he knows we've all had them. So what are those issues that have caused challenges in your relationship with your spouse? That's the thing. Have you resolved them? Because if you haven't, they're still there. And do you need to communicate to her about them to make sure you resolve them? And later in the book, John actually talked about some of that he kept hidden for a long time and felt like he had to share with her that was in that area. And then I loved it because it really plays with what I felt like in mine. What's that defining moment? Do you have a defining moment where you made a change to be the husband, the father to your life that you wanted to be? I know for mine, it was a spiritual retreat in 2006 that I did. It was a Curacao, a 3-day weekend, and it made me realize that I was really a pretty big jerk because that success, I was driving for that. Yeah, I was able to leave her at home, but I wasn't doing my part on the home front. I was just kind of thinking, that's her area because, she's able to stay home. And that really changed it for me. And I'm not saying I'm perfect yet by any means. If you all ask Dana, she'll tell you that I'm not and things of that nature. But I will tell you, I started making a change and started realizing, how can I help? How can I be more helpful in that? And it was our job to raise our children together. She didn't marry me to raise the children. It's our role as a father is to raise them together. And again, you ask my 3 kids, they won't tell you I'm a perfect father either. But the thing is, I did spend more time in that area then, realizing that the business wasn't the only thing. And I think as entrepreneurs, that's our challenge is we can dig into business and we love solving problems, but sometimes that other side of it, that may not be what we think is our strength, but that's still an area that we have to be important on. So curious for you, Nick, how have you seen that? Because, you got that growing family and got a growing business too. So it creates challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to remember to make a point to do it. I just got to be more cognizant. I mean, it's easy to have a bad day and say the wrong thing, and or to bring work back home when I should have left it at work, or my bad day, not leaving it at work and bringing it home and affecting the kids and Lindsay and stuff. So I just got to just be more cognizant of it and just take a step back, take a breath, and devote true family time to them. And I feel like I've done a better job with that here, just even in the past year. I've just made a point to be a better husband and father and stuff to them. So, but not perfect by any means either. So.
But the thing is, you're willing to work on it and you're willing to keep it top of mind. I think that's a key. And it kind of talks about on 40 to 42, it says you have to be willing to change. When you change, you're able to change your relationship for the better. Deciding to change was the best thing that ever happened to me and subsequently to my wife and kids. And this was John saying this. I learned that changing doesn't take a lot of talent and skill. It just takes a willingness and desire to be better for yourself and the people around you. You have to be willing to look at your flaws and ask, how can you improve? You have to be willing to be uncomfortable as you remove old bad habits and replace them with good habits. You have to be willing to make others a priority. You have to be willing to invest in yourself and your relationships and your family. And that was on page 40 and 42 where he talks about that. And I think that's so powerful because we have to have the willingness first, because we can say, oh yeah, we want to be that. But if we don't work on it, we won't become that person. Yep. So relationships are always a challenge. So let's talk a little bit about chapter 3. It talks about invest and where we got to invest in our relationships and how to have a great relationship. You can't act like you're two separate teams. And that's really what I felt like was happening for me earlier on from 1999. That's when we had our first child up to 2006 to that time that I made that change. I felt like we were kind of on two separate teams. I was on the team about bring home the money, bring home the bacon, as they say. She was on the team, take care of the children. Yeah, we'd go on vacations and things of that nature. But I can tell you, I wasn't present. There was things going on. And I remember today, and it's one thing I'll never get back that she has is the things that they did. And I have a hard time remembering some of those things because I wasn't present during it, because I was thinking too much about the business. And I don't want people to have to do that on that. So how are you investing your time and energy to become that one team that supports each other? So they talked about a couple questions I thought was interesting. Are you a consumer or investor in your marriage? Remember, you can give and take from your marriage. What are you doing to invest in your marriage and in your spouse? And that's the key, is how are we investing? We may know how to invest to, make more money in our business and everything else, but are we investing that same time, some of that fun? I know you love talked to one time about doing woodworking with your daughter. And I'm sure it slowed you down on everything you were doing, but that's investing in your daughter when you're giving her that time.
Yeah.
Anything there as far as investing or how you can, kind of in your marriage with your spouse, what you can share? Anything you want to share there, Nick?
I mean, we have similar passions. I guess it's almost been a year, maybe 8 months. We've started working out in the mornings together. She's a lot more diligent than I am, but I try.
I'm gonna have to talk to her to keep the whip on you then, huh?
Right. But I'd say 4 times a week, I typically work out in the morning with her and go down to the basement before the kids are up and work out and spend that time together. And fortunately, most of our passions and interests and stuff are similar, so it allows it. It's easier to talk to her about what my day was like at work, because she can understand that. So it's just more communicating. So me talking, before I just go home and kind of want to shut down, not talk about it, not just have some me time and maybe play with the kids a little bit, but just taking the time and sharing. That's made a difference.
Yeah, find those small little things just like that on the exercise. It may seem crazy, but it's allowing you to spend some of that time together. It's a great one, right now, since we're in summer, you can walk some. I mean, and even there, sometimes it's great with even the kids are there, but you can have some of those conversations as they're riding their bikes along. I remember sometimes we did that. This one becomes a big one. And this is one, I'll be honest, I was challenged with. I can't say I'm over it, but I was definitely challenged. Don't keep score. Do you keep score when you do something in your marriage? It's almost like a check mark, And in my head, I'll be honest, I did. It's like, it's one of the worst things, because early on it was like, well, I took care of that for you. I did this, kind of that score. I brought home the check, I'm allowing you to stay home and stuff. That keeping score. Oh man, that's where he talks about on page 47. He says, it's important to understand that it's not going to be equal all the time. And it shouldn't be equal all the time. There's times that she's going to do more for you, and there's times you're going to do more for her, but you shouldn't be saying, well, I've done this. And when we have that, we split apart. That's where them braids start becoming frayed, and they ultimately will break apart if you keep that score. And the thing I will tell you, I'll tell any guy that's listening here, is I've had some buddies that they start to give you signs when they're starting to fray, because they'll say things about their spouse that are not very flattering. And I've been in some of those conversations, and I've pulled a couple of those gentlemen apart side and said, hey, is everything okay? And then find out a few months or 6 months later, they're getting a divorce. So just really think about, how are you approaching that? And that comes down to the next one. He talked about communicate. And I don't know if it was her or him, which one it was, but where there is void, negativity will fill it. How is your communication with your spouse? How is your communication with your children? Because one thing I've found is, if you don't have that communication early, it's hard to get it later on that. Because when they become teenagers, Nick's going to be in that stage in just a few years. It'll go really fast. And then you think, wow, this is totally different. It's kind of fun when you come home now and they say, Daddy, you're home,
Right.
when those days end, man, they don't come hugging, they'll stay in their, wherever they're at, in their room, or if on the couch or wherever, and stuff on that side of it. So I always made it fun when they got a little bit older. It was my little tease. I was like, Daddy, I'm home, and I'd come, and they didn't think it was too funny though. So you got to have fun with them. Then they talked about what you talked about, Nick, that shared vision and purpose. Do you have a shared vision and purpose on how you want to raise the children? The things that you believe in, don't believe in. We had to have discussions around that. I mean, I was in the wireless industry, the mobile phone industry, and my kids didn't get a phone until they graduated to 8th grade. They had other kids that got them before that. And things. So what are those things you want for your family, and for the internet, all those things? Do you have a kind of vision and purpose of how you want to raise your children? It doesn't get deep into that, but I think that's important in a relationship, and it's really important on what you want to do in each of the relationships. And then they talked about encourage instead of compete. Page 71, here's the one here that I thought really stuck out to me is, in order to pursue your goals and dreams together, you need to encourage each other instead of competing with one another. So say that again. In order to pursue your goals and dreams together, you need to encourage each other instead of competing with one another. And the question I had down here was, how are you encouraging your spouse for her dreams and her goals? What are you doing in those areas? I think that becomes the real key. Well, the next area he talked about was the 4 C's. And the 4 C's was communicate. It's the foundation of every relationship. It begins with great communication. Talked about C, connect. Connecting is essential because you'll never have commitment without connection. 3rd C was commit. Committing means at times you sacrifice your own desires for the good of relationship. And then the 4th one is care. In great relationships, the couple care more about each other and the relationship, so they give their all to each other. And I thought that was pretty interesting how they shared that, the 4 C's on communicate, connect, commit, and care. Then we get into chapter 4. We're going to just roll through the whole thing today, and then I'll come back next time, and hopefully we'll have a few more to pick up, and if they want to join us. But chapter 4 is T is for together. So when the relationships have grit, you don't give up when things are hard. And there's always going to be that time that it's going to be challenging and it's going to be hard. So you work together, you invest in your relationship, and through the process, you become stronger. And I thought that's really, he kind of brings it all together on page 81. He talks about this chapter brings grit all together. When you make God the center of your relationship and you resolve to stay together and you invest in your relationship together, you not only develop relationship grit, you also create a special relationship filled with more love, joy, laughter, intimacy, and commitment than you ever thought possible. That's on page 81. So if you haven't looked at, you might go back to that and have everybody that's watching this go back to those 5 areas and stuff, and really tell yourself, what is it for you? And then they ended up with kind of the 5 Ds. And these are really the things you need to know and understand how these negative forces work. And that starts on page 90. You have to find the ways to stay stronger, how to overcome them. And he's discovered these 5 Ds that will destroy any relationship if you let them. The first one is distort. Negative thoughts or lies that fill your minds and they're not coming from you. The second one is discourage. These lies then discourage you. They make you feel less than unworthy. They make you feel things that won't improve. Your future is hopeless. Third one is doubt. The lies and discouragement lead to doubt, where we no longer trust our mate or ourselves to God. The 4th D is distract. When you are discouraged and doubtful, you become more easily distracted. You look at what seems appealing and move toward it, makes bad choices. Where you think something's always greener, grass is greener on the other side of the fence. We've always heard those terms. And then the 5th one is divide. When truth is distorted, you believe the lies, become discouraged, doubtful, and distracted. This leads to division. You become separated from each other mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You feel disconnected and divided from your mate as well as God in that side of it. So kind of some big areas there in those 5 Ds that really need to take a look at. And then I kind of end it with, make your relationship a priority. Question is your relationship the most important thing in your life? And do we have to answer? Is your business your most important relationship? Or is it really your family and your spouse? Is she the most important relationship? And each person has to ask that for themselves. And I told you already my story. Early in my career, it was not. I mean, early on, Dana had her career and we both were running our own ways. Yeah, we were a couple and everything else. And then we started having children and she took the career of being mother and that motherhood and did very well at it. But I wasn't doing my part of being the father. So what is it for you? What's your relationship? Is it something else or is it your relationship with your spouse or and significant other? And then I loved he ended, or she ended, I forget which one, the right words at the right time. What words are you using with your spouse in your communication? And I kind of shared this, you kind of start to see some signs from people, because if you start saying negative things about your spouse, that's where them 5Ds come in. And that can be an ugly road to go down. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at it. And then they gave some great tips for a great relationship. From Catherine's, her point, she had 11 tips there. Those, to be quite honest, I want to take and really frame almost, because she talks about bring God in your relationship, communicate your expectations, have a shared vision, don't compete, give compliments, don't keep score, appreciate your differences, teach them how to treat you, agree to disagree, do the things that make your partner happy and be willing to do the things your partner doesn't like to do. Take time to be intimate. And then John shared his 11. Heal together, give each other strength, be willing, make your relationship a priority, communicate, communicate, communicate. Take one for the team. The more I love my wife, the more I love my life. So a little saying on that, but the more I love my wife, the more I love my life. Become one team, have a shared vision, give each other space, but not too much space. Keep working at it. Don't quit. But I think it's one of these great books that just for partners to be able to really take a look at. And you can see that there's a list of questions. So if your spouse did read it, there is a list of questions in the back of the book that you can have a discussion on 127 and 128 that you could actually have a discussion together about. But again, I highly recommend, don't tell them they should read the book. Tell them, hey, I read this. This was in our mastermind group and stuff. If you'd love to read it sometime, I'd love to kind of have a discussion and see where are the areas, because there's probably some gaps right now. Anybody's relationship, I can raise my hand. I know there's some gaps in Dana's and I relationship. Well, how can we make that better? And when you're willing to work on it, you're able to do it. Nick, if you don't mind, share with us what kind of comes to mind for you as you read the book.
I mean, I liked it. I liked that it had both perspectives on there. They were very different perspectives. They were very relatable because, he was a business owner and had the restaurants and stuff. But it was very relatable as far as the struggles and stuff that they went through. It was written really well, so it's very easy to read. When I brought it home, my wife said, "Oh boy, do you want to tell me something?" Like this is with the book club, but I'll let you know. So I'm almost through it. I'm just about to the R, I believe, or the T. I'm sorry. So I'm about 3/4 through it, and so I'll probably finish it up here in the next night or two. But yeah, it's something that I'll leave out, and hopefully she'll pick up because it was very relatable. Let's put it that way.
And we'll come back in our next session and we'll talk a little bit just overall about each of the areas and stuff. I did end up going kind of a whole review this time, but I think the key is really what did we learn from it and what do we take away? And I think that becomes the key. And even if your spouse will not pick it up, you can learn some things there. And if anybody wants my notes and stuff on that side, I'd be glad to give them. But you can learn from the 5Ds, the 4Cs. I mean, John is good about acronyms and making things simple and easy. That's his writing style. That's why he's been so successful. I think now he's got 23 books and he's co-authored some of those books with people. He just did one with a friend of mine, that Alex Dimachek, The Sale, and it's about trust and integrity. And he's one that hopefully Alex, it's going to work out when we have our next live event. It's going to come down live. He's out of Columbia, Missouri, and he wrote this book in conjunction with John. But he does these fables a lot of time. This one is not a fable, but I loved how the two perspectives, like you said, because it really allowed me to see not just my perspective, but from a lady's perspective, what do they see too, what they want. And it's not going to be exactly the same or what your spouse wants, but it gives you got to think a little bit differently. Well, Nick, I'm glad you joined me today and stuff. Just remember, get through the book, Relationship Grit. We're going to come back in 2 weeks and talk a little bit more about it, by John and Catherine Gordon. And remember, GRIT stands for God, Resolve, Invest, and Together. And I think the big thing I want to do is, one reason I read this book early, when it came out in January. I was on vacation. I don't think it was this January. I think it was last January it came out. And I just felt like in this area, when we're talking about relationships, and that's our kind of quarterly focus, what a great book to really think about. How are we treating our spouse and our significant other in our relationship? So hope some of the Mastermind members, as you watch this, maybe it'll spur you on. If you got the book, if you didn't get the book, it's easy to get, just go get it. We've got another book coming up next month that we'll have, and we'll just keep sharing books, and it's a way for us to keep learning. So Nick, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
Everybody, make it a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.